Tennessee, David Tulis.
The story that broke Saturday about Mayor Andy Berke and the Confederate Cemetery tells a bit about the mayor, who is a Jewish Democrat lawyer, and about his perspective. And it is a kind of virtue signaling that he is taking part in, to be, as it were, to be part of the uproar over Confederate general monuments, Confederate leader monuments around the South, and really all around the country, where there are men in blue, men in gray, who are honored by obelisks, by statues, by parks, by representations, by plaques. And insofar as any of those may have worn the gray, that identification has to be stricken from the books. And these are not necessarily history, these monuments, but they are arguments about history. Every monument is not historical, I would suggest, but it is a statement, an interpretation about the war and about meaning and about life in America today, life in Tennessee, life in Chattanooga. What does it mean to be a Chattanoogan? What does it mean to be an American that had a country that was a confederation, a union of states, of independent sovereign states that united to form the States United? That is to say, their servant, the federal government, back in the late 1700s, in effectively a coup that took place in Philadelphia, breaking apart the Confederated States of that time, the Confederation, and creating a national government of the strong type, right? The strong type, the leadership type that we are used to today. One that now is a kind of exercises a kind of monarchical and executive power over the people and over the states themselves. This is David Tulis, and we are here at Nooga Radio. Thank you for giving us a couple of minutes of your time. We're looking at this cemetery uproar and the tremendous response that John Wilson at Chattanooga.com has received on the first letter objecting to this effort by the mayor to separate the city from its connection with that cemetery. There were about, when I looked Sunday, there were about 17 responses. Some of them were very good. I think every single one of them was against what the mayor was proposing to do. Now, just in a nutshell, if you haven't kept up with local news and you've been watching the twittering info gals on national television, the story is that the mayor has asked Wade Hinton, a very highly intelligent city attorney, to investigate a connection that the city has with a trust. It is apparently a trustee of property that is near Erlanger Medical Center and the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. And in it are buried parties that are called they're American soldiers. Now, I think most of them are Confederates, but by Yankee decree after the war, all the dead from that war are considered American veterans. There's no distinction made between the two categories. And so in that cemetery, there are American soldiers that are equally have an equal status, at least in you might say the military federal culture, among themselves, right? Between the blue and the gray, the dead are of equal value, to be equally respected, equally regarded and esteemed, etc., with the usual blathering formalities that are common on such patriotic occasions where they're remembered. And the mayor wants the city to be removed as trustee. Now, when you're a trust is a kind of just, by the way, this is David Tulis, and I believe in trust. Okay, I believe in trust, and I believe in trusts, the legal form. And if you, let's just say briefly, you, my listener, want to not own anything, right? You're fearful of litigation. You're fearful of enemies. Maybe you have enemies. Maybe you are in politics. Maybe you're involved in a controversial business. Maybe you're someone who's just worried about our litigious society. You can not own anything by having everything put into trusts. Now, these are a trust is a legal fiction that came from the era of religious persecution in Europe, where people who were either leaving as fugitives or leaving on a crusade, perhaps, would put into trust property held by, let's say, the local abbot. or the local friars, and the trust would be managed. The property in the trust would be managed by the convent, if you will, or the abbot as trustee, and he has a stewardship obligation to further the interest of that property and the owner who's not there, and is effectively the owner and legally is the owner, though clearly a trust is a kind of mirror, right? It's a mirror that says, okay, you're looking at me, but you're looking at him. Okay, you're not seeing me, but I'm deflecting the image of from myself to the owner who's over here, who's put the property in trust for me to be a caretaker of, right? Of which I'm the caretaker. And so that's what a trust is. And sometime back in the about the time probably around World War II era, people who ran this cemetery for the dead and oversaw it put it into a trust, and Chattanooga is named as at least one of the trustees. Now, I'm not sure how that works if you have multiple trustees. There are things that are effectively backup trustees or secondary trustees. If the first one fails or dies, you have a backup a trustee. So, for example, I don't own any cars. Right, my cars are all owned by trusts, and this is the David Tulis do-it-yourself way of doing things. And I'm legally a poor man, and I did that decades ago for estate planning, just to have my estate planned out. As a young married man, I put everything into a trust, into various trusts, and so the city is in this situation as well. But as trustees, it has a kind of nominal authority, nominal responsibility over the property. But apparently, according to the story in the Chattanoogan, the trust terms expired, or somehow the authority lapsed or became null with the passage of a certain date, and so now the city is trying to, as it were, get entangled from a web which is ensnarled its limbs and ensnarled its reputation, or so Mayor Berke suggests by the story that came out and his very lively statement in the press, given, of course, just to select media outlets, not all of them, but just the good ones, right? Just the good media outlets got this press statement, and he says in it that he watched in horror the Charlottesville events, and of course he condemns President Trump for Trump's 2 press conferences, which were really just Trump. That was the best Trump that you could find, just speaking his mind and not playing games, and not willing to be diplomatic, but just saying things that were really true about there being 2 sides in that fight. You have the Marxist left, and then you have the fascist right in that, and others. Right, there were many others involved in that event, including people such as Terrence Hightower here in Chattanooga, who went there to support the monument of General Lee and to oppose its being removed by the executive branch of Charlottesville government. So there were many sides to that event, and the apparent clash was between the so-called Southern white supremacists, as they're called, right? That's the convenient label put upon the whole of one side in the press, and the other side, since there was a clash of arms, if you will, the other side was the fascist left, and or the fascist right. So they're all kind of, it's all kind of confusing. And here the mayor makes the silly comment that what happened there was domestic terrorism. That is simply ridiculous. It's just a riot. Okay, it was a riot. It was a melee, and to call it domestic terrorism is simply to fall into the fear trap that is very common in our day. That we have to be afraid. We all should be fearful and worried, and we should all be thinking in terms of security. That's what all of these narratives, the Berke's virtue signaling. They're all about playing you, the listener, to be fearful and anxious. That's what you're supposed to feel here, and that's why there's this sense in your heart of the urgency of the mayor's steps. Right, the mayor has got to get the city off of the bullseye. We need to get out of the bullseye of this horrible connection, this legal connection. That's why I have asked our city attorney to file paperwork to remove the city as trustee, he says, of the Confederate cemetery on 3rd Street. Owned by trust, the city was named as trustee as far back as 1942. And then he has this statement: our city should be invested in our future, not a discredited past. Confederates fought against America to preserve slavery. Now that shorthand is just, I just think it's a wonderful statement. It's kind of hilarious, but it's a wonderful statement because it shows what the public school should do to you and did do to him. He has read all the conventional books. He has read the conventional textbooks that tell you that Confederates fought against America because they were not part of America at all. They fought against America. Notice he's equating, Mayor Berke is equating the federal government with America. And in fact, your analysis and mine is completely opposite of that. We would say that the United States has declared war on America even now, even today, here in Chattanooga, in the amazing broadcast range of Nooga Radio, that there is a war of the United States against America. And if we're defending anything, if you, my listener, care to defend anything, it is to preserve and restore America, if that's possible. And the villain in the piece, the bad guy, the bandito, right, the brigand in the piece, is the United States. It's not America. It's the United States. So, of course, America, the idea of America is a poetical concept. It is a kind of social construct. It is a cultural phenomenon, and America is it is not a particular thing. It's not nothing you can put your hand on. It's not a geography. It's not a state. It's not a corporation. It is you might say the mass of history of all the American people combined and what that story tells. It is very bleak though, because the Mayor Andy Berke has a racist secret that we're going to look at today here on the David Tulis. So he says that this action today makes it clear that the city of Chattanooga will not condone any traces of racism that taints our past. Any traces. And what's so funny is there's a writer here in Chattanooga. He's a radio personality, and I called him last night, and his name, just so you'll know who he is. I'd never heard of him before. His name is Jason Kibbe. He is a DJ at another radio station, and he had a letter at the very end of a stack of about 17 complaints about the mayor at Chattanooga. And the insight is that the Erlanger family was involved in raising capital for the Confederacy, and this was history with which I was not familiar. And I'd say that a little bit of history often just tempers these sort of theatrical presentations of the kind that we are enjoying this morning from the mayor's office. Does not condone any traces of the racism that taints our past. And then the mayor in his statement goes on to he's a good man in a way, because he wants to offer practical advice. He says, well, here we are complaining about this thing, and it's kind of a hot issue, and it's part of a larger narrative here in Chattanooga. We don't want to be left out, right? So we're going to have to have our part in that conflict, our part in that great social melee that's taking place in TV broadcasts and online. And we want to show that we care. Chattanooga city government cares, run by me. I'm the chief executive of this government. But I don't want people just to think that they just have to have an opinion on something. Let's not just have opinions against racism and white supremacy. Let's do something. And here though, we are advised to go into the embraces of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a hate lobby. It is a hate organization, if there ever was one. And the reason it is one is because it uses the word hate, an appellation. It simply does a serious and careful academic study of every group that comes to its attention by email, filled with links to bad people. And then it makes a determination whether someone is a hate group, or whether whether James Dobson and Focus on the Family is a hate group, or whether a particular Christian church that espouses constitutional government as part of its members' thinking, whether that's a hate group, or whether Steve Wilkins at a Presbyterian church in Louisiana. He's a noted writer and a Presbyterian, kind of a Presbyterian dissenter in the past couple decades. Whether he is a hate monger, and so here the mayor, trying to be helpful, directs us into the embraces of an organization that's all about playing on the fears of people, playing on the fears. We are being played. We are being played. And the mayor goes on to say there are other groups that you should take part in. You should You should fight white supremacy. Of course, he's a white. The mayor is a Caucasian. Let's just say he's a Caucasian, but the nonprofits that we can be involved in, again, in the helpful mode, the NAACP, the Jewish Community Center, the Islamic Center, Tennessee Valley Pride, of course, that's the queer organization, the Lug Butt Group, and La Paz, respond with action. And read the Southern Poverty Law Center's Guide to 10 Ways to Fight Hate. And then, report discrimination. Be a fair housing tester, and work on Chattanooga's MLK Day of Service. Those are good. That's good advice. I mean, I'd say that he's trying to be practical, and I think that's a very good thing to make it practical. But the mayor's presentation neglects the history, of course, and makes what happens when you take that line of thinking, which you could say is a centralist line of thinking, a unitary government perspective, you are making secret arguments. The open arguments is, well, that you're against slavery, you're against the supremacy of white people over black people, and because you make the argument, especially in this noisome time right now, in the past couple of weeks, because you're making these arguments in a noisome way, it becomes really impossible to think about the real issues. And here is the problem that journalists have, and especially op-ed people and columnists and talk show host people have, and that's saying, well, it's criticizing someone for saying one thing and not saying something else. And I think it's hard. It's often just wrong to do, and I try not to do that, to say, well, the mayor should be talking about these other things over here and not this. And it's just not fair. Right? It's not fair to the mayor to say, well, he should be talking about black aborticide rather than make a big deal out of the cemetery. But I'm going to do that. Okay, I'm going to do what I think maybe not entirely fair. And here's why the mayor doesn't care about black babies being killed. Okay, he doesn't care about them being killed often by white abortionists. Let me ask you this question. If you knew of a white person who tore to shreds a black person, who took that person piece by piece, the soft bone tissue of that black person, broken in pieces and pulled out, and then the head of that black person crushed by large forceps to get that head through the birth canal, would you be upset? And think if there were a video showing that, what would you do? There's this black child, and you have these white hands. Of course, the hands are not white; they're in blue sanitary gloves, working the tube there, the little instruments at the opening of the birth canal there of the woman laying spread-eagled on the gurney at the Women's Health Center, right? Let's say you could see a movie of that, and you actually could see, so put it in your mind's eye. Okay, just imagine it happening. It's in your mind's eye, and that's what's happening. Would you be upset? Would the mayor be upset? Well, I'll tell you what, I have checked on the stale data the Tennessee state government provides about the number of black babies killed in Tennessee and the number of black babies killed from mothers who live in Hamilton County. Now, by God's grace, the number of babies killed in Chattanooga is probably a very small one. It may happen in some doctor's offices, but because of God's grace in Chattanooga, there is a shunnable. It's a shunnable offense. If you're found to have killed a child in your doctor's office, you are maybe not in legal trouble, but you may be in social trouble, because if you're found out, guess what? David Tulis is going to make note of it at Nooganomics.com. And in fact, the Chattanooga Time-Free Press may actually make a brief out of it, a 6A brief, out of the fact that a doctor is being accused of having committed an abortion in his office. But that's about the coverage it'll get. But it's something that, because of the effect of the gospel in Chattanooga, because of the interest of the gospel in grace, right? Grace and mercy and life, it's hard to kill black babies in Chattanooga. Though I would say probably it happens sometimes. Okay, it happens sometimes when you have some doctors of high reputation probably do and get away with it, but the rest say no, I'm not going to. What does the mayor say about that? And I'm not going to say he should talk about that. Maybe that's unreasonable to expect that a liberal Democrat Jewish mayor would talk about that. But he can't talk about it. Right? He's incapable of talking about it because his presuppositions deny his religious presuppositions deny that an unborn child is a human being, especially, or not especially, but even though that child may be a black, right? That black child may be a black or Hispanic. And Tennessee has this stale data. It's so moldy. I mean, it almost reeks. It reeks almost as bad as the tomb of Lazarus did when they rolled back the stone, and it said after 4 days he stinketh. Well, these are old statistics from 2015. But let me ask you this: do you think that proportionally more blacks are slain by the baby killers or more whites? What do you think? I'll ask you that question. Now, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you the story. But first, I've got some important messages here on Nooga Radio. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news